Socrates 470 between 470 469 between 470 469 and 399 BC was a classical Greek Athenian philosopher credited as one of the founders of Western philosophy. He is an enigmatic figure known chiefly through the accounts of classical writers, especially the writings of his students Plato and Xenophon, and the plays of his contemporary Aristophanes. Plato's dialogues are among the most comprehensive accounts of Socrates to survive from antiquity. Though it is unclear the degree to which Socrates himself is hidden behind his best discipline. Hidden behind his best discipline, Plato says. Through his portrayal in Plato's dialogues, Socrates has become renowned for his contribution to the field of ethics, and it is this Platonic Socrates who lends his name to the concept of Socratic irony and the Socratic method, or Alencurs. The latter remains a commonly used tool in a wide range of discussions and is a type of pedagogy in which a series of questions is asked not only to draw individual answers but also to encourage fundamental insight into the issue at hand. Plato's Socrates also made important and lasting contributions to the field of epistemology, and his ideologies and approach have proven a strong foundation for much Western philosophy that has followed. Nothing written by Socrates remains extant. As a result, information about him and his philosophies depends upon secondary sources. Furthermore, close compression between the contents of these sources reveals contradictions, thus creating concerns about the philosophy of knowing that the real Socrates. The issue is known as the Socratic problem or the Socratic question. To understand Socrates and his thought, one must turn primarily to the works of Plato, whose dialogues are through the most informative source about Socrates' life and philosophy, and also Xenophon. These writings are the Socraticoi logoi, or Socratic dialogues, which consist of reports of conversations apparently involving Socrates. As for discovering the real life Socrates, the difficulty is that ancient sources, or mostly philosophical or dramatic texts apart from Xenophon. There are no straightforward histories contemporary with Socrates that dealt with his own time and place. Corollary of this is that sources that do mention Socrates do not necessarily claim to be historically accurate and are often partisan. For instance, those who persecuted and convicted Socrates have left no testament. Historians therefore face the challenge of reconciling the various evidence from the extant text in order to attempt an accurate and consistent account of Socrates' life and work. The result of such an effort is not necessarily realistic, even if consistent. Amid all the disagreement resulting from differences within sources, two factors emerge from all sources pertaining factors emerge from all sources pertaining to Socrates. It would seem, therefore, that he was ugly, and that Socrates had a brilliant intellect. This is why I keep saying, don't you ever judge the book by its cover, please. Socrates as a figure, like the character of Socrates as exhibited in Apology, Crito, Phaedo, and Symposium, concurs with other sources to an extent to which it seems possible to rely on the Platonic Socrates, as demonstrated in the dialogues, as a representation of the actual Socrates as he lived in history. At the same time, however, many scholars believe that in some works, Plato, being a literary artist, pushed his avowedly brightened up version of Socrates far beyond anything the historical Socrates was likely to have done or said. Also, Xenophon, being an historian, is a more reliable witness to the historical Socrates. It is a matter of much debate over which Socrates it is whom Plato is describing at any given point, the historical figure or Plato's fictionalization. As British philosopher Martin Cohen has put it, Plato, the idealist, offers an ideal master figure for philosophy. As saint, the prophet of the sun god, the teacher condemned for his teachings as a heretic. It is also clear from other writings on historical artifacts that Socrates wasn't simply a character nor an invention of Plato. The testimony of Xenophon and Aristotle, alongside some of Aristophanes' work, especially the Clothes, is useful in fleshing out the perception of Socrates beyond Plato's work. As a philosopher, if you are talking about Socrates as a philosopher, philosophically, the problem with discerning the Socrates' philosophical views stems from the perception of contradictions in testaments made by the Socrates and the different dialogues of Plato. These contradictions produce doubt as to the actual philosophical doctrines of Socrates within his milieu and as recorded by other individuals. Aristotle, in his Magna Moralia, refers to Socrates in words which make it patent that the doctrine virtue is knowledge was held by Socrates. And in the metaphysics, he states Socrates was occupied with the search for moral virtues, being the first to search for universal definitions for them. The problem of understanding Socrates as a philosopher is shown in the following in Xenophon's Symposium. Socrates is reported as a saint. He devotes himself only to what he regards as the most important art or occupation, that of discussing philosophy. However, in the Clouds, Aristophanes portrays Socrates as accepting payment for teaching and running a sophist school with Paraphon, also in Plato's Apology and Symposium, as well as in Xenophon's accounts. Socrates explicitly denies accepting payment for teaching. More specifically, in the Apology, Socrates sees his poverty as proof that he is not a teacher. Two fragments are extant of the writings by Timon of Philos pertaining to Socrates, although Timon is known to have written to ridicule and lampoon philosophy. Details about the life of Socrates can be derived from three contemporary sources: the dialogues of Plato and Xenophon, both devotees of Socrates, and the plays of Aristophanes. He has been depicted by some scholars, including Eric Havelock and Walter Ang, as a champion of oral modes of communication, standing against the hazards diffusion of written. In Aristophanes played the clone, Socrates is made into a clone of sorts particularly inclined towards sophistry, who teaches his students how to bamboozle how to bamboozle their way out of debt. However, since most of Aristophanes' works function as parodies, it is presumed that his characterization in this play was also not literal. Socrates was born in Alopec and belonged to the tribe Antiochus. His father was Sophronicus, a sculptor or stonemason. His mother was a midwife named Phanereth. Socrates married Xanthippe, who is especially remembered for having an undesirable temperament. She bore for him three sons. Lamprocles, Sophronicus, and Menexenus. Socrates first worked as a stonemason, and there was a tradition in antiquity, and not credited by modern scholarship, that Socrates crafted the statues of the three Graces, which stood near the Acropolis until the 2nd century AD. Xenophon reports that because youths were not allowed to enter the agora, they used to gather in workshop or surrounding it. Socrates frequented these shops in order to converse with the merchants. Most notable among them was Simon the shoemaker. Let's talk about military service in those times, ancient Greek times. Military service. For a time, Socrates fulfilled the role of hoplite, participating in the Peloponnesian War, a conflict which a conflict which stretched intermittently over a period spanning 431 to 404 BC. Several of Plato's dialogues refer to Socrates' military service. In the monologue of the Apology, Socrates states he was active for Athens. And Socrates states he was active for Athens in the battles of Amphipolis, Delium, and Potidaea. In the Symposium, Alcibiades describes Socrates' valor in the battles of Potidaea and Delium, recounting how Socrates saved his life in the former battle between 219 and 221 BC. Socrates' exceptional service at Delium is also mentioned in the lectures by the general after whom the dialogue is named. 100 in the Apology, Socrates compares his military service to his courtroom troubles and says anyone on the jury who thinks he ought to retreat from philosophy must also think soldiers also should retreat when it seems likely that they will be killed in battle. Epistates at the trial of the 6 commanders. It's trial of the generals. It was during 406. He participated as a member of the ball. His tribe, the Antiochus, held the Britannia on the day. It was debated what fate should befall the generals of the battle of Arginius, who abandoned the slain and survivors of foundered ships to pursue the defeated Spartan navy. According to Xenophon, Socrates was the epistates of the debate, but Delbecque and Hartfeld think this is an embellishment because Xenophon composed the information after Socrates' death. The generals were seen by some to have failed to uphold the most basic of duties, and the people decided upon capital punishment. However, when the Britannia responded by refusing to vote on the issues, the people reacted with threats of death directed at the Britannia itself. They relented, at which point Socrates alone, as epistates, blocked the vote which had been proposed by Callicrenus. The reason he gave was that in no case would he act except in accordance with the law. The outcome of the trial was ultimately judged to be a miscarriage of justice or illegal, but actually Socrates' decision had no support from written statutory law, instead being reliant on favoring a continuation of less strict and less formal nomos law. Rest of Plato's Apology, parts 32c to 32d, describes how Socrates and four others were summoned to the Tholos and told by representatives to the oligarchy of the 30. The oligarchy began ruling in 404 BC to go to Salamis, and from there to return to with Leon the Salaminian. He was to be brought back to be subsequently executed. However, Socrates returned home and didn't go to Salamis as he was accepted to. Let's talk about the trial of Socrates. Socrates lived during the time of the transition. Socrates lived during the time of transition from the height of the Athenian hegemony to its decline with the defeat by Sparta and its allies in the Peloponnesian War. At a time when Athens, at a, at a time when Athens sought to stabilize and recover from its humiliating defeat, the Athenian public may have been entertaining doubts about democracy as an efficient form of government. Socrates appears to have been critical of democracy, and some scholars interpret his trial as an expression of political infighting. Claiming loyalty to his city, Socrates clashed with the current course of Athenian politics and society. He praises Sparta, arch-rival to Athens, directly and indirectly in various dialogues. One of Socrates' purported offenses to the city was his position as a social and moral critic. Rather than upholding a status quo and accepting the development of what he perceived as morality within his region, Socrates questioned the collective notion of might makes right that he felt was common in Greece during this period. Plato refers to Socrates as the gadfly of the state, as the gadfly stings the horse into action. So Socrates stung various Athenians insofar as he irritated some people with considerations of justice and the pursuit of goodness. His attempts to improve the Athenians' sense of justice may have been the cause of his execution. According to Plato's Apology, Socrates' life as the gadfly of Athens began when his friend Chaerephon asked the oracle at Delphi if anyone were wiser than Socrates. The oracle responded that no one was wiser. Socrates believed the oracle's response wasn't correct because he believed he proposed. Socrates believed the oracle's response wasn't correct because he believed he possessed because he believed he possessed because he believed he possessed no wisdom whatsoever. He proceeded to test the riddle by approaching man considered wise by the people of Athens. Statements, poets, and artisans in order to refute the oracles' pronouncement, questioning them. However, Socrates concluded, while each man thought he knew a great deal and was wise, in fact they knew very little and were not wise at all. Socrates realized the oracle was correct, while so-called wise men thought themselves wise and yet were not. He himself knew he was not wise at all, which paradoxically made him the wiser one, since he was the only person aware of his own ignorance. Socrates' paradoxical wisdom. Socrates' paradoxical wisdom made the prominent Athenians he publicly questioned look foolish, turning them against him and leading to accusations of wrongdoing. Socrates defended his role as a gadfly until the end. At his trial, when Socrates was asked to propose his own punishment, he suggested a wage paid by the government and free dinners for the rest of his life instead. To finance the time he spent as Athens' benefactor, he was nevertheless found guilty of both corrupting the minds of the youth of Athens and of impiety, not believing in the gods of the state. And subsequently sentenced to death by drinking a mixture containing poison hemlock. Xenophon and Plato agree that Socrates had an opportunity to escape, as his followers were able to bribe the prison guards. There have been several suggestions offered as reasons why he chose to stay. One, he believed such a flight would indicate a fear of death, which he believed no true philosopher has. Second one, if he fled Athens, his teaching would fare no better in another country, as he would continue questioning all he met and undoubtedly incur their displeasure. Third one, having lonely agreed to live under the city's laws, he implicitly subjected himself to the possibility of being accused of crimes by its citizens and judged guilty by its jury, to the otherwise would have caused him to break his social contract with the state, and so harmed the state and an unprincipled act. Fourth one is if he escaped at the instigation of his friends, then his friends would become liable in law. The full reason behind his refusal to flee is the main subject of the Crito. Socrates' death is described at the end of Plato's Phaedo. Socrates turned down Crito's pleas to attempt an escape from prison after drinking the poison. He was instructed to walk around until his legs felt numb. After he lay down, the man who administered the poison pinched his foot. Socrates could no longer feel his legs. The numbness slowly crept up his body until it reached his heart. Shortly before his death, Socrates speaks his last words to Crito. Hey Crito, we all hey Crito, we owe a rooster to Asclepius. Please don't forget to pay the debt. Asclepius was the Greek god for curing illness, and it is likely Socrates' last words meant that death is the cure and freedom of the soul from the body. Additionally, in why Socrates died, dispelling the myths, Robin Waterfield adds another interpretation of Socrates' last words. It suggests that Socrates was a voluntary scapegoat. His death was the purifying remedy for Athens' misfortunes. In this view, the token of appreciation for Asclepius would represent a cure for Athens' ailments. Let's talk about the Socratic method. Perhaps his most important contribution to Western thought is his dialectic method. Perhaps his most important contribution to Western thought is his dialectic method of inquiry, known as the Socratic method or method of Elencus, which he largely applied to the examination of key moral concepts such as the good and justice. It was first described by Plato in the Socratic dialogues. To solve a problem, it would be broken down into a series of questions, the answers to which gradually distill the answer a person would seek. The influence of his approach is most strongly felt today in the use of the scientific method, in which hypothesis is the first stage. The development and practice of this method is one of the Socrates' most enduring contributions and is a key factor in earning his mental is a key factor in earning his mantle as the father of political philosophy, ethics or moral philosophy, And as a figurehead of all the central themes in Western philosophy, the Socratic method has often been considered as a defining element of American legal education. To illustrate the use of the Socratic method, a series of questions are posed to help a person or group to determine their underlying beliefs and the extent of their knowledge. The Socratic method is a negative method of hypothesis elimination, in that better hypotheses are found by steadily identifying um, in that better hypotheses are found by steadily identifying and eliminating those that lead to contradictions. It was designed to force one to examine one's own beliefs and the validity of such beliefs. An alternative interpretation of the dialectic is that it is a method for direct perception of the form of the good. Philosopher Karl Popper describes the dialectics as the art of the intellectual intuition of visualizing the divine originals, the forms or ideas, of unveiling the great mystery behind the common man's everyday world of appearances. In a similar vein, French philosopher Pierre Hadot suggests that the dialogues are a type of spiritual exercise. Spiritual exercises. Hadot writes that in Plato's view, every dialectical exercise, every dialectical exercise, exercise precisely because it is an exercise of pure thought, subject to the demands of the logos, turns the soul away from the sensible world and allows it to convert itself toward the good. Let's talk about the philosophical beliefs. The beliefs of Socrates as distinct. The beliefs of Socrates as distinct from those of Plato are difficult to discern. Little in the way of concrete evidence exists to demarcate the two. The lengthy presentation of ideas given in most of the dialogues may be the ideas of Socrates himself, but which have been subsequently deformed or changed by Plato, and some scholars think Plato so adapted the Socratic style as to make the literary character and the philosopher himself impossible to distinguish. Others argue that he did have his own theories and beliefs. There's a degree of controversy inherent in the identifying of what these might have been, owing to the difficulty of separating Socrates from Plato and the difficulty of interpreting even the dramatic writings concerning Socrates. Consequently, distinguishing the philosophical beliefs of Socrates from those of Plato and Xenophon hasn't proven easy. So it must be remembered that what is attributed to Socrates might actually be more the specific concerns of these two thinkers instead. The matter is complicated because the historical Socrates seems to have been notorious for asking questions but not answering, claiming to lack wisdom concerning the subjects about which he questioned others. If anything in general can be said about the philosophical beliefs of Socrates, it is that he was morally, intellectually, and politically at odds with many of his fellow Athenians. When he is on trial for heresy and corrupting the minds of the youth of Athens, he uses his method of elencos to demonstrate to the jurors that their moral values are wrong-headed. He tells them that they are concerned with their families, careers, and political responsibilities when they ought to be worried about the welfare of their souls. Socrates' assertion that the gods had singled him out as a divine emissary seemed to provoke irritation. Socrates' assertion that the gods had singled him out as a divine emissary seemed to provoke irritation, if not outright ridicule. Socrates also questioned the sophistic doctrine that red virtue can be taught. He liked to observe that successful fathers, such as the prominent military general Pericles, didn't produce sons of their own quality. Socrates argued that moral excellence was more a matter of divine bequest than parental nurture. Socrates argued that moral excellence, Socrates argued that moral excellence was more a matter of divine bequest than parental nurture. This belief may have contributed to his lack of anxiety about the future of his own sons. Also, according to Long, there should be no doubt that despite his claim to know only that he knew nothing, Socrates had strong beliefs about the divine, and citing Xenophon's Merobalia. According to Xenophon, he was a teleologist. According to Xenophon, he was a teleologist, was held that God arranges everything for the best. Socrates frequently says his ideas are not his own, but his teachers. He mentions several influences: Prodicus, the rhetor, and Anaxagoras, Anaxagoras, the philosopher. Perhaps surprisingly, Socrates claims to have been deeply influenced by two women besides his mother. He says that Diotima, Plato's Symposium, witch and priestess from Mantina, taught him all he knows about eros or love, and that Aspasia, the mistress of Pericles, taught him the art of rhetoric, rhetoric, taught him the art of rhetoric. John Burnett argued that his principal teacher was the Anaxagorean Archelaus, but his ideas were, as Plato described them. Eric Havelock, on the other hand, considered Socrates' association with the Anaxagoreans to be evidence of Plato's philosophical separation from Socrates. It's like Socrates is back. If we're gonna talk about the paradoxes, Socratic paradoxes especially. Many of the beliefs traditionally attributed to the historical Socrates have been characterized as paradoxical because they seem to conflict with common sense. The following are among the so-called Socratic paradoxes. One is, no one desires evil. Second one is, no one errs or does wrong willingly or knowingly. Third one is, virtue. All virtue is knowledge. Fourth one is, virtue is sufficient for happiness. The term Socratic paradox can also refer to a self-referential paradox originating in Socrates' utterance, what I do, what utterance, Socrates' utterance, originating in Socrates' utterances. What I don't know, I don't think I know. Often paraphrased as, I knew that I knew nothing. Ancient Socratic knowledge. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a nice night. See you later. Your son, your brother, Sardes ulaşmak üzere. Kardeşiniz, evladınız, Sardes ulaşmak üzere. İskoçya'dan saygılar, selamlar, hürmetler efendim. Hayırlı Ramazanlar.